Florence Harper knew exactly how many steps it took to cross from the cash register to booth 411. She knew because she'd taken them every weekday for the past 11 years. The Magnolia Diner, perched on the corner of Chestnut and Maple in Asheville, North Carolina, wasn't glamorous. It had a crooked door and a coffee pot older than her last relationship. But it was home. What she didn't know was why that man kept sitting across the street every morning. She noticed him again that day. Same place as always, near the bike rack, back straight, hands tucked into the sleeves of a weather-worn sweatshirt. He didn't ask for anything. Never did. Just sat, observing. Still. Florence. Carla's voice sliced through the steam of the kitchen. Table 2 wants more jam, and Kyle called again. Third time this week. Florence grabbed the jam and ignored the rest. Kyle Travers didn't know how to let go, but she'd stopped answering his calls when she realized she missed the silence more than she missed him. She slid the jam across the table to the tourists and gave them her practiced smile. But her eyes drifted toward the window again. The man hadn't moved. There was something unexplainably dignified about him. His clothes were worn but clean, posture calm, and his eyes held the weight of a man who'd once known the sound of glass being clinked in boardrooms and now listened to wind and sparrows instead. "Go talk to him," Carla whispered as she passed, balancing a tray of cornbread and grits. "You're going to snap your neck staring like that." Florence shook her head. "Not my business. You said the same thing when Nora's faucet was leaking and ended up spending Saturday replacing the whole sink. That was my mother. This is a stranger." Carla arched a brow. So was Kyle once. She hated how right her friend was sometimes. Still, Florence didn't move. Not yet. At 11:30, as always, the man stood, stretched slowly like someone who carried years in his joints, and walked away. No begging, no glances inside. Just gone. Florence exhaled, unaware she'd been holding her breath. By 2 p.m., the lunch crowd had dwindled. The bell above the door chimed, and Pastor Liam stepped in, brushing off the cold with his usual easy grace. "Afternoon, Florence," he said warmly. "Your mama sent me to remind you she wants someone at her birthday dinner. She says 39 is long enough to show up to family events alone." Florence sighed, wiping her hands on a rag. "She say that before or after judging the city's choice of porch wreaths?" He chuckled. "Both, actually." "I'm not bringing anyone, Liam. It's not like they're handing out eligible bachelors with the specials. You know it's not about that. It's about her seeing you. Happy. Settled." Florence stiffened. That word, settled, rubbed her raw. Like she hadn't built a life. Like the walls she patched, the meals she served, and the roof she held up for her mother didn't count unless a man sat beside her. "I'm fine," she said, a little too sharply. "And Mom'll survive another dinner without a +1. Liam studied her. "It's not about survival. She just wants to see you loved." Florence turned away, busying herself with coffee pots and sugar packets. "Tell her I'll be there. On time. Alone." That night after closing, Florence stepped outside and pulled her coat tighter around her. The street was quiet. Shops were locking up, lights dimming. She paused near the bike rack. No one there. She almost walked past it. Almost. But then she saw it, tucked under the bench, a folded newspaper and a plastic container, empty but wiped clean. Someone had left him food, or he'd eaten quietly without notice. She hesitated, then walked into the bodega next door. 15 minutes later, she stepped back out, holding a bag, soup, sandwich, and bottled water. She waited. At 8:47 he returned. He walked slower now, as if unsure whether the space still welcomed him. Florence cleared her throat. The man looked up, startled. "Hi," she said, bag outstretched. "You missed lunch today." He blinked once. His eyes, green, intense, and too calm for someone living on the edge, met hers. He didn't reach for the bag. "I don't take handouts." "It's not a handout," she said. "It's lunch. Late." A pause. Then he stepped forward and took the bag gently, like it was something sacred. "Thank you," he said. His voice was quiet, deep, and carried the weight of unspoken things. "I'm Florence." A long beat passed before he answered. "Lionel." She nodded. "Nice to meet you, Lionel." He gave her a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Likewise." Florence tucked her hands into her coat. "You don't have to sit on the curb. There's a bench outside the diner. Bit warmer." Lionel looked toward it, then back at her. "Won't cause trouble?" "You haven't yet." He nodded once and walked toward the bench. Florence stayed behind, watching. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. That night she tossed in bed. Something about him stayed with her. The quiet dignity. The way he didn't ask for anything, yet his presence asked everything. She thought of her mother's birthday, of Pastor Liam's words, of that empty chair at every holiday table. A ridiculous thought tiptoed into her mind, number absurd. But still, it lingered. What if, just for one night? She turned over again and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere outside, under the streetlights of Asheville, a man named Lionel ate soup slowly, with the same quiet grace of someone who'd once had everything, and now had nothing but silence. And Florence, who had everything in order but nothing truly hers, began wondering if pretending for a moment might be better than arriving alone. Again. Florence stood at the diner counter the next morning, staring at the laminated menu she'd seen 1,000 times. She wasn't reading it. She just needed something to look at besides Carla's raised eyebrow. "You're doing that thing again," Carla said, popping her gum as she refilled the napkin holders. "The thing where you pretend you're thinking about hash browns when you're actually thinking about someone else entirely." "I'm not doing anything," Florence muttered, but the color rising in her cheeks gave her away. Carla glanced toward the front window, where Lionel sat on the bench, the same spot as the night before, his hands wrapped around a styrofoam cup. He looked out of place and completely at peace. There was something cinematic about him, like a man dropped in from a different life, one with corner offices and jazz playing in the background. "You gave him your homemade soup last night," Carla said, voice low. "That's not just being kind. That's Sunday best soup." Florence didn't respond. She didn't have a good reason for what she'd done. It had just felt right. "Are you going to ask him inside or just watch him through the glass like a Hallmark movie extra?" Carla leaned against the counter, teasing but gently. "Florence, you've been alone too long to keep pretending that's your choice." Florence didn't flinch, but something inside her did. She could feel the weight of that empty space next to her at every dinner table, every holiday. She told herself she was too busy, that she was fine, but fine felt cold at night. Still, she shook her head. "It's complicated." "You mean it's easy and you're scared?" Florence opened her mouth to respond, but the bell above the door rang, and in walked Nora, shoulders squared, lips tight, walking stick tapping like a metronome of judgment. Florence straightened. "Mama, I wasn't expecting you." Nora scanned the diner like she was grading it. "Figured I'd stop by since you've avoided all my calls. Sunday's getting close." Florence braced herself. "I just want this birthday to be nice," Nora said, voice softening. 70's no small thing. It'd mean a lot if you brought someone." Florence turned away, grabbing a coffee pot. "I told you, I'll be there, alone." "You don't have to be." Nora's gaze followed hers out the window, her eyes narrowed. "Who's that?" "Just someone I gave soup to." Nora paused. "He looks respectful." Florence sighed. Don't start. I'm not starting. I'm just observing. There was a long silence, broken only by the hum of the refrigerator and Carla pretending not to listen. Nora finally stood straighter. Fine. Come alone. But don't expect me not to worry. A woman your age— Florence spun around, her voice sharper than intended. What? Needs saving? Needs to prove she's not a failure because she doesn't have a ring? Nora blinked. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. They stared at each other across years of expectation and silence. Nora's face softened. I just want you to have joy. That's all. Whatever form it takes. Florence looked down. Her fingers were trembling slightly. When she looked back up, Nora had already walked out, leaving behind the smell of lavender and too many unspoken things. The door closed softly. Florence turned to Carla, who was now openly staring. You know, Carla said carefully, there's one way to shut her up for good. Florence squinted. I'm afraid to ask. Bring Lionel, just for the party. Florence stared at her. Are you insane? Look, Carla said, walking around the counter. You show up with someone who's not a local, doesn't know the family gossip, and looks like he reads hardcover books? You'll buy yourself 6 months of peace. Florence shook her head. He's a stranger. He's polite, clean, quiet, probably knows how to use a salad fork. You'd be doing both of you a favor. Florence turned toward the window again. Lionel was still sitting there, slowly sipping the coffee she'd handed him earlier. The morning sun lit up the edges of his face, casting long shadows behind him. He looked like a question waiting to be asked. You're not seriously considering this, Florence whispered. Carla grinned. I see that look. You're halfway there. Florence wiped her hands on a towel and walked outside before she could talk herself out of it. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fried eggs and mountain pine. Lionel looked up as she approached. I owe you another meal, he said. That soup was the best thing I've had in a long time. Florence didn't smile. She was too nervous for that. I have a question, she said. He waited. It's my mother's birthday Sunday, big deal, Southern production, and she wants me to bring someone. He raised an eyebrow. I told her I would, Florence continued, but I didn't really have anyone. I don't date much. I can't imagine why not, he said quietly. She blinked, caught off guard. I'm serious. I need a plus one. You'd be fed, clothed, and introduced as someone who reads poetry and once helped me change a flat tire. Lionel looked amused. That didn't happen. They don't know that. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded once. All right. Florence frowned. All right? I'll do it. Just like that? I've had stranger dinners. She didn't know what to say. Part of her had expected him to laugh, or politely decline, or disappear. Instead, he looked up at her with eyes that didn't flinch. I'll need a haircut, he added, and maybe something with buttons. Florence exhaled, trying not to laugh. You can meet me here tomorrow at noon. Carla owns a salon. He stood slowly, every movement deliberate. I'll be here. And just like that, she had a date, a fake date, with a man she'd only known for 48 hours, who may or may not have a last name, who slept somewhere she didn't ask about and drank coffee like it was holy. As she watched him walk away, something in her chest fluttered, half warning, half thrill. What in the world had she just started? Lionel showed up 5 minutes early. Florence noticed him through the diner window as she was tying her apron strings in the back, and for a second, just a split second, her breath caught. He wasn't sitting on the bench. He was standing, shirt tucked in, hands resting calmly in his pockets, like he'd been someone's prom date once. Maybe even someone's groom. He wore a clean button-up, soft gray with faint blue checks. It wasn't new, but it was pressed and the collar held its shape like someone had taken their time. He looked present, not polished, not flashy, just quietly intentional. "He cleans up nice," Carla muttered as she peeked through the blinds. "Too nice." Florence narrowed her eyes. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Carla said, crossing her arms, "most men you drag to your mama's party for pretend boyfriend duty don't walk in looking like they've walked out of a Ralph Lauren ad for the humble and mysterious." "He's not—" Florence paused. "I didn't drag him." Carla gave her a look. "I didn't," she insisted. "I asked. He agreed." "Which makes it even stranger," Carla said, backing away from the window. "No one says yes that fast unless they've got nothing to lose or something to hide." Florence turned before Carla could say more. She wasn't in the mood for cynicism, even if part of her agreed. She stepped outside, the sun warming her face, and forced a smile as Lionel turned to greet her. "You came. You said noon. You clean up well." He smiled, a small but real one. "I had some help. Barber down the street offered a shave in exchange for half a sandwich and a recommendation for jazz records." Florence tilted her head. "You know jazz?" "I know a little of everything." He wasn't bragging, just stating fact. They walked together to Carla's salon, a small shop tucked behind the bakery with a painted door and the scent of lavender and hot irons lingering in the air. The bell above the door chimed as they stepped in. "Well, well," Carla drawled from behind the counter. "The mystery man walks among us." Lionel nodded politely. "Carla, I presume." "You presume right," she said, eyes scanning him from head to toe. "And you've got good bones. I'll do my best to make sure your head doesn't ruin Florence's reputation." Florence rolled her eyes. "Can we just start?" "Take a seat, Romeo." Carla pointed to the chair. "And try not to flinch when the scissors come out." Florence watched as Carla draped the cape over Lionel's shoulders. His reflection in the mirror was steady, unbothered. Most people got awkward in that chair, too vulnerable, too exposed. But not him. "Why are you really doing this?" Carla asked, comb in one hand, scissors in the other. Florence tensed. Lionel looked at her in the mirror, then back at Carla. "Because someone asked me," he said simply. Carla smirked. "People ask a lot of things. Doesn't mean you say yes." "I do if I want to." Florence didn't know what to do with that answer. It wasn't evasive. It wasn't flirtatious. It was honest. The room grew quiet except for the snip of scissors and the soft jazz coming from the radio in the corner. Carla worked with quiet precision, combing, and Florence found herself watching his hands. They were clean now. Long fingers, slightly calloused. Not the hands of someone who'd never worked, but not the kind you'd expect on someone sleeping rough. "You ever been married?" Carla asked, like she was asking about the weather. "Once," Lionel said. Florence blinked. That hadn't come up before. Carla paused. "Kids?" "No. What happened?" "People change," he said. Not cold, not defensive, just final. Florence swallowed hard. Something about the way he said it hit her in a place she hadn't opened in years. She looked away before her face betrayed her. By the time Carla spun the chair around and dusted off his collar, Lionel looked like someone who had always belonged in that space. His hair swept neatly to one side, his jawline freshly defined. The same man, but clearer now, like someone had cleaned the glass on a frame that had always held value. Carla handed him a small mirror. "Don't say I never gave you anything." Lionel smiled. "Thank you." Florence stood awkwardly near the door, suddenly unsure of what this had all turned into. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just... You look different." "Still me," he said. "Are you?" she asked. half meaning it as a joke, half not. He didn't answer, just looked at her for a beat too long, then gently said, "I'm not here to hurt you, Florence." Her throat tightened. "I know," she said quietly. She didn't finish. They walked back toward the diner, not speaking. The sidewalk hummed with late lunch traffic and passing bikes, but something about the quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was heavy, like pages in a book they weren't ready to turn. At the corner, Lionel stopped. "What if your mother asks how we met?" Florence turned toward him. "We keep it simple. You came into the diner. I served you coffee. We started talking." He nodded slowly. "And what do I do for work?" Florence hesitated. "We don't get into details. You're between things." He raised an eyebrow. "Between what?" She exhaled. "Just let me do the talking." Lionel smiled. "Deal." They stood there for a moment, traffic rolling by, people living their regular lives. Florence felt something shift in her chest. Not attraction exactly, but attention. He wasn't just some man from the sidewalk anymore. He was a person. A puzzle she hadn't meant to pick up, but now couldn't stop turning over in her hands. She stepped back, suddenly flustered. "I've got prep for dinner. I'll see you Sunday?" "Wear the same shirt," she said, too fast. Lionel laughed under his breath. "All right." She walked away before her face betrayed her again. She didn't look back, but she felt his eyes on her until she turned the corner. And for the first time in a long time, she wasn't sure if she was faking something for her mother or walking into something she wouldn't be able to fake her way out of. Florence hadn't worn that dress in 5 years. It was soft rose, sleeveless, with a lace overlay she'd nearly ruined in the washer once. She remembered slipping it on for a wedding back when she still believed in those. It wasn't flashy. Her mama would have never allowed that. But it hugged her in the right places and made her feel like a version of herself she didn't see often enough. Tonight, it had to be enough. The mirror caught the nerves in her eyes. She tried smiling. It didn't take. Outside, dusk had already settled over Asheville. The hills wore a lavender haze, and the air smelled like honeysuckle and barbecue smoke. Nora's house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, all brick and blooming azaleas. The porch light was on. Her mama's version of a lighthouse, a warning, a welcome, both. Florence stood on the driveway a beat too long. Her heart kept pushing against her ribs like it was trying to escape. "You okay?" She turned. Lionel had just stepped out of the car, smoothing his shirt, the same gray checked one she'd asked him to wear. He looked steady, as if walking into a stranger's birthday party pretending to be someone's boyfriend didn't even register on his stress meter. She nodded, suddenly grateful for his calm. "Yeah, just family things." "Family things," he repeated softly. "Got it." They walked toward the porch together, their steps quiet against the stone path. Florence stopped before reaching the door. "Okay, quick run-through," she whispered. "We met at the diner. You're between jobs. You're charming, well-mannered, and you absolutely adore me." Lionel smiled. "That one might be tricky." She gave him a look. "Joking," he said. "Got it." She took a breath and knocked. Nora opened the door faster than expected, already wearing her Sunday pearls and a look of barely contained curiosity. "Well now," she said, eyes flicking between them. "You must be Lionel." He nodded. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Harper. Florence has told me a lot." "Oh, has she now?" Nora stepped aside. "Come on in. Dinner's almost ready. I hope you like ham." "I love it," he said, following her inside with practiced grace. Florence entered behind him, every nerve in her body buzzing. The living room looked the same. Floral wallpaper, family photos on every surface, the smell of cinnamon and roast ham settling like memory in the walls. The guests were already there. Carla, of course, in a deep green jumpsuit, sipping sweet tea by the side table. Pastor Liam stood near the fireplace talking to Nora's bridge partner, Eleanor. And then there was Josie Kendall, nose twitching like she could sniff out gossip before it even happened. Florence pasted on a smile. "Thank you all for coming." Carla raised a brow and mouthed, "He's hot," the second Lionel wasn't looking. Florence gave her a warning glance. "Florence," Nora called from the dining room, "come help me with the deviled eggs." She followed her mother into the kitchen, leaving Lionel behind to mingle. The smell of paprika hit her as soon as the door swung shut. "Well," Nora said without turning around, "he's not what I expected." "Meaning what?" "Meaning I expected a last-minute date to be awkward or made up. Not someone who looks like he belongs in Southern living." Florence said nothing, helping her mother arrange the plates. "You like him," Nora said after a pause. "Mama." "I'm just saying, I know that look. You know nothing. It's an act." Nora glanced over her shoulder. "Is it?" Florence met her eyes, and for a second neither of them smiled. Then Nora turned back to the eggs. "Well, if it's an act," she said, "he's doing a fine job. I saw the way he looked at you when you walked in. Men don't fake that." Florence busied herself with the napkins. When they returned to the living room, Lionel was in mid-conversation with Liam, nodding thoughtfully. He caught her eye and gave her a smile that landed somewhere in her stomach. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way. "Dinner's ready," Nora announced. They gathered around the table, glasses clinking, laughter mixing with the rustle of cloth napkins. It felt too normal, too easy. Florence waited for the other shoe to drop. "You from around here?" Liam asked Lionel. "Originally. No," he replied, "but I've come to appreciate Asheville." "What do you do?" Florence jumped in. "He's between jobs right now, was in tech before." Josie sniffed. "Tech? That's a wide net." "Startup consulting," Lionel added smoothly. "Things shifted after the market downturn." "Ah," Liam said, leaning back. "You one of those smart ones, huh?" "Some days." Florence felt the tension loosening from her spine. Lionel answered each question with poise, never overstepping, never oversharing. He didn't say much, but when he did, everyone listened. Later, after the plates were cleared and Nora had opened her birthday gifts, they gathered on the porch, sipping tea and watching the fireflies begin their slow dance across the lawn. Florence stood near the railing, arms folded, heart full and confused. Lionel stepped beside her, hands in his pockets. "You're quiet," he said. "It's a lot." "You did good tonight." She looked up at him. "I didn't do anything. You're the one who charmed a room full of Southern skeptics in under an hour." He smiled. "Well, I had a good co-star." Florence paused, eyes scanning the yard. "You were married," she said softly. "Yes." "What happened?" He took a long breath. "She loved who I was on paper, not who I was when everything unraveled." Florence swallowed hard. "That's honest. It's easier now, telling the truth." She looked at him, the porch light casting a soft glow over his profile. He looked more man than mystery in that moment. "I appreciate what you did for me," she said. He turned to face her fully. "Florence, I didn't come tonight just for you." She blinked. "What?" He held her gaze, calm and direct. "I came because I needed to remember what it felt like to sit at a table and not pretend I didn't exist." The words landed with quiet weight. They stood in silence, the porch creaking slightly beneath them, the hum of distant cicadas filling the space between heartbeats. Florence's voice was barely above a whisper. "Well, you existed just fine tonight." And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was performing her life. She was living it, one borrowed evening at a time. Florence couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, and the night pressed in through the windows like a weight. Every clock tick, every creak of the old wood floors under her feet felt louder than it should. She stood in the kitchen with a cup of chamomile, hands wrapped around the mug like it could hold her together. Her heels were off, dress folded over the back of the chair. Her earrings still dangled from her ears. She hadn't had the energy to finish getting ready for bed, like the moment was still unraveling and she didn't want to fold it away too soon. The knock came soft, almost unsure. She froze. Another knock, then a pause. She opened the front door cautiously, expecting maybe Carla dropping something off, or Nora second-guessing her choice of words at dinner. Instead, Lionel stood there, hands in his pockets, a look on his face she couldn't place. Not quite nervous, not quite calm either. "I was walking back to my bench," he said quietly. "But the sky looked different, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to end the night like that." She stepped aside without thinking. "You shouldn't be walking this late." "I'm used to it." "That doesn't mean you have to be." He gave a quiet nod, stepping inside. She led him to the kitchen where the lights were soft and warm, the scent of her tea still hanging in the air. "You want something?" she asked. "I'm fine." He sat down at the small table, folding his hands together like he had something to confess but didn't know how to start. Florence took the chair across from him and waited. "It was a good night," he said finally. "It was. You looked—" He stopped. "Like yourself, if that makes sense." She smiled faintly. "I think it does." Lionel looked around the kitchen. Modest, clean, everything in its place. His gaze landed on the refrigerator covered in magnets and pictures, a faded Polaroid of Florence and Carla, one of her with her mother holding a pie, and a postcard from Wilmington she'd never mailed. "You've made a life here." "I had to," she said. "When my dad passed, Mama couldn't hold everything together on her own, and I didn't want to leave. Not then." He nodded slowly, like he understood more than she'd said. "I had a life too," he murmured. "A big one, loud, full of people who said my name too often." "What happened?" He hesitated, then in a voice quieter than the ticking clock said, "I started believing I was only worth what I could give." Florence didn't respond right away. She let the weight of his words settle between them like a stone dropped in still water. "What did you give them?" "Everything," he said simply. "And they took it?" He looked up, met her eyes. "Of course they did. That's what people do when they think you'll never stop giving." Her heart ached at the truth in that. She'd lived a different version of the same story. Love that leaned heavy. Expectations that hollowed you out slowly. "Is that why you left it all?" she asked. Lionel looked down at his hands. "I didn't leave. I disappeared. There's a difference." Florence nodded. "Did it help?" "It kept me breathing, that's something." They sat there, two people who'd built quiet lives from pieces of louder ones, people who understood silence not as absence, but as survival. She stood up suddenly, needing movement. She crossed to the cabinet, pulled out a small tin from the back. "What's that?" he asked. She opened it and unfolded a square of worn fabric. "It's the start of a quilt. I've been collecting pieces, old aprons, dish towels, scraps from dresses I don't wear anymore." He reached out, ran a finger over the soft edge. "It's beautiful." "It's unfinished," she said. "Like most things in my life." He looked up, something kind in his expression. "Doesn't mean it's not worth keeping." She folded it carefully and placed it back in the tin. "Where will you sleep tonight?" she asked, not facing him. "I don't know. Thought I'd figure it out on the way." "You could stay here," she said before she could stop herself. He paused. "Are you sure?" She turned around. "The couch is decent. It folds out. I've had worse. I don't want to make you uncomfortable." "You haven't yet." He gave her a long, steady look. "Okay, thank you." Florence found the extra blanket and set it beside the couch, her hands moving on autopilot while her mind raced. She couldn't remember the last time she'd invited someone into her home this way. Not out of pity, not out of guilt. Just because. He sat on the edge of the couch as she handed him the pillow. "Florence?" She looked at him. "Thank you for tonight, for letting me pretend, for letting me breathe." She swallowed the lump in her throat. "You didn't pretend, not once." He gave a small smile. "Then maybe I did better than I thought." She lingered in the doorway as he stretched out on the couch, the blanket pulled up to his chest, his eyes already half closed. "Good night, Lionel." "Good night, Florence." She turned off the kitchen light and walked back to her room, the echo of his voice following her down the hall like something half-remembered. And when she lay in bed, eyes open in the dark, she realized the house didn't feel as quiet as it usually did. It felt filled, not with noise, but with presence. And that was something she hadn't let in for a long, long time. Florence woke to the smell of coffee. For a full second she forgot what day it was, or that someone else was in the house. The light spilling through her curtains was soft and golden, the kind that made you think the world might be kind today. She sat up slowly, brushing the sleep from her eyes, and listened. The clink of a spoon against ceramic, the low hum of a kettle. Silence between sounds that wasn't empty, but lived in, present. She wrapped her robe around herself and stepped into the hallway, following the scent. Lionel stood at the stove, barefoot, stirring a pot with quiet concentration. He looked like he belonged there, like the kitchen had always known him. "You cook?" she asked, surprised at how gravelly her voice sounded. He glanced over his shoulder. "Just oatmeal. Hope you don't mind." Florence blinked. "You made oatmeal?" "I found cinnamon and some chopped pecans in the pantry," he said, offering a faint smile. "Figured I'd make myself useful." She leaned against the doorframe. "Most people would have just waited for toast." "I'm not most people." "No," she said softly. "You're not." He poured 2 bowls with care, placing them on the small kitchen table. The chairs creaked as they sat, and for a moment neither of them said anything. Then Florence glanced up. "I forgot what it felt like." "What?" "To wake up and know someone else is already up, already thinking about how to start the day." Lionel stirred his spoon. "I forgot that too." They ate slowly, in the kind of silence that didn't rush. But when she looked up again, Lionel wasn't watching his food. He was watching her, not with expectation, just awareness. She set her spoon down. "I should get dressed. I open the diner in 20. "I'll clean up," he said, already rising. She paused at the edge of the doorway. "You know you don't have to keep trying so hard." "I'm not trying," he said quietly. "I'm just remembering how to be around someone again." Florence felt that line settle somewhere deep. It stayed with her even after she'd pulled on jeans and a blouse, tied her apron at the diner, and greeted the morning regulars. But by 10:15, she knew something was off. People were staring. Not the usual curious glances she got when someone noticed her hair was up or a new pair of earrings. No, this was different. Sharper. Intentional. Josie Kendall sat at the counter sipping coffee and barely hiding her smirk. "Morning, Florence," she sang out. "Busy night?" Florence blinked. "Excuse me?" "I saw the light on at your place after 11, Josie said, too casually. "And then this morning, I spotted a man leaving your front steps. Tall, broad shoulders. Same one from your mama's party?" Florence stiffened. "That's none of your business." Josie held up her hands, mock innocent. "Of course not. but you know how folks in this town talk, especially when something looks unbalanced. Florence narrowed her eyes. Unbalanced? Josie leaned in. You, with someone like that? Doesn't quite add up. You've been here all your life. People know your story. But him? No one knows where he came from or what he wants. Florence forced a smile she didn't feel. Maybe he doesn't want anything. Maybe he's just decent. Josie sipped again. Or maybe he's got a reason for hiding. Carla appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She caught the tension and raised a brow. Josie stood, dropping a few bills on the counter. Just looking out for you, sugar. Some people come into town wearing charm like a borrowed coat. Sooner or later it slips. Florence didn't speak until the door closed behind her. Carla stepped closer. You okay? Florence's voice was low. She's wrong. I know. But now I can't stop thinking about it. Carla exhaled. It's a small town, Flo. People notice everything. Doesn't mean they know anything. Florence nodded, but her stomach twisted. By the end of her shift, she was exhausted. Mentally, emotionally. She wasn't used to defending what hadn't even been defined, and she definitely wasn't used to someone being in her house when she got home. Lionel was out back, fixing the loose hinge on the porch gate. She watched him from the screen door. Tool belt slung over one hip, sleeves rolled up, calm, focused. You didn't have to do that, she said as she stepped outside. He straightened. It was squeaking. Florence crossed her arms. People are talking. He nodded once, unsurprised. They want to know where you came from, why you're here, why someone like you would be with someone like me. Lionel met her eyes. And what do you think? I think... She hesitated. I don't know what this is. It doesn't have to be anything, he said gently. I told you I'd show up, be kind, and disappear if that's what you needed. But I didn't think it would feel like this. Like what? Like it matters. Lionel stepped closer, slow, deliberate. It does matter, to me. She looked away. Then tell me who you are. He paused. I'm someone who once had everything and realized too late that it meant nothing without truth. Her breath caught. Then tell me the truth, she said. His voice lowered. I'm not ready yet. She nodded slowly, stepping back. Then maybe I'm not either. The gate clicked shut between them, and for the first time since she'd met him, Florence realized something terrifying. She didn't just like Lionel. She trusted him. And if she wasn't careful, that trust might crack open parts of her she'd buried a long time ago. Florence was folding napkins at the corner booth when Carla slid into the seat across from her without asking. You're quiet, Carla said. I'm always quiet. No, you're thoughtful quiet. This is storm is brewing quiet. Florence smoothed the edge of a napkin, sharp and neat, like her thoughts were trying to be. But they weren't. He's still at the house, she said finally. Fixing the porch steps. Carla raised an eyebrow. That man's been here, what, a week? And he's repaired more things than your last 3 boyfriends combined. Florence didn't laugh. Carla noticed. What happened? Josie, Florence muttered. Her voice spreads faster than lightning and sticks twice as long. She's asking questions. So are customers. Carla leaned in. Do you care what they say? I didn't, Florence said, eyes not meeting hers, until he started pulling away. Until I realized I was waiting for him to tell me something real. Carla's tone softened. You think he's lying? I think he's protecting something. And I'm not sure if it's himself or me. Carla reached across the table, laid her hand over Florence's. You have good instincts. Trust them. Florence wanted to, but instincts didn't answer questions. They didn't fill silence or calm the pounding in her chest when she looked at him and wondered what was locked behind that careful calm. The front bell chimed. Florence looked up just in time to see Pastor Liam step inside. He caught her eye, smiled, and made his way over. "I'm not here for coffee," he said gently, "though if you've got some of that pecan pie left." Florence stood, pulled a slice from the counter. "To go?" He nodded. "Thanks." As she boxed it up, he leaned against the counter. "I ran into Lionel at the hardware store yesterday. He was asking about paint for the railing. He's helpful." Liam studied her. "You okay?" Florence hesitated. "People are starting to ask things I don't know how to answer." Liam didn't rush her. He never did. "I don't know where he's from," she said. "I don't know what he left. I only know that when he's near, I breathe easier. And when he's not, I can't think straight." That sounds a lot like love. It's not. Why not? Because it's not real. It started as a favor, a story, a made-up connection to make my mother happy for one night. And now? Now it feels like I'm the one pretending. Liam folded his arms. "Florence, let me ask you something. If this were someone else's story, someone you were serving pie and advice to, what would you say?" She looked up, caught off guard. I'd say you don't invite someone into your life, into your home, into your quiet, unless something about them fits where there was once a gap. Then maybe it's time to stop pretending it's just a story." Florence handed him the pie box. "Thanks, Liam." "Any time." He gave her a small nod and walked out, leaving the scent of cinnamon and something heavier behind. She didn't see Lionel until that evening. She came home to the porch light already on, the steps freshly painted. He was sitting on the swing, sleeves rolled to the elbows, eyes lifted to the darkening sky. "You should have waited," she said. "I wanted to finish it before the weather turns." She joined him, the wood creaking softly beneath her. "They're talking," she said. "I know. They're asking questions. I figured they would." She turned to him. "You said you weren't pretending. But you're not telling me anything either. That's a kind of pretending, too." He didn't look away. "You're right." The silence stretched. "I came here to disappear," he said quietly. "After I lost everything that felt solid, I didn't want to explain anymore. I didn't want to be known for the worst version of my story." Florence's voice was barely above a whisper. "But you let me believe you were just no one." "I never said that." "But you didn't correct me either." Lionel exhaled. "You looked at me like I was a man, not a mistake. I didn't want to ruin that." Her throat tightened. "I can't keep lying for you," she said. "I'm not asking you to." "Then what are we doing?" He looked down at his hands. "I don't know anymore. It was supposed to be one night, one dinner, and then I'd go back to the edges. But you—" He lifted his eyes to hers. "You made me want to stay in the center of something." Florence felt the crack in her resolve. "Then be honest with me," she said, "because I'm falling into something I didn't plan for, and I'm not doing it alone." He leaned back, the swing shifting slightly. "My name is Lionel Mercer. I used to run a company that built things. Technology infrastructure, partnerships. Then my brother sold his shares to a competitor behind my back. The board sided with him. I walked away before they could take everything else." She stared. "I left the money, the name, the city. I left the noise. I wanted to find something that didn't want me for the headline." She said nothing for a long time, then, "And what do you want now?" He turned toward her, eyes bare. "I want to matter, quietly, for the right reasons." She swallowed. "I can't promise what this is, but I can't ignore it anymore." "Then maybe we stop pretending altogether." She looked at him, really looked. You're asking for something real. I'm asking for a chance to try. Florence leaned into the back of the swing. The wind moved through the trees, soft and sure. Then we do it right, she said. No more secrets, no more half-truths, just you and me. As we are, he nodded once. And one more thing, she added, standing. What's that? You're sleeping in the guest room tonight. If we're not pretending anymore, we do this right. A pause. Then a smile broke over his face, steady and warm. Yes, ma'am. Florence walked inside, leaving the door open behind her, not as an invitation, as a promise. The guest room smelled faintly of cedar and old comforters, the kind that had lived through winters and weddings and heartbreaks. Florence stood in the doorway for a moment after Lionel disappeared inside, her fingers curled around the door frame like she needed something solid. The quiet wasn't awkward. It was something else. Charged. Brimming with every word they hadn't said, but now couldn't take back. She walked back into the kitchen, poured herself a glass of water, and stared out the window into the dark. The porch light buzzed softly above the steps he'd painted just yesterday, now dry and smooth. A fresh surface. A start. She didn't sleep well. Not because of fear or doubt, but because her heart wasn't used to this rhythm, one that pulsed with truth and stillness at the same time. By morning, the smell of eggs and something sweet pulled her from the covers. She found Lionel in the kitchen again, barefoot, humming softly as he flipped French toast on the skillet. "You're going to spoil me," she said from the doorway. "You make room in your house for me." "I make breakfast," he replied without turning. "Seems fair." "You sing when you cook?" "I hum when I'm nervous." Florence smiled and stepped further in. "What are you nervous about?" He looked at her then, eyes tired but light. "That I might want to stay longer than I should." She sat at the table, folding her hands together. "Maybe that's not such a bad thing." He plated the toast, dusted it with powdered sugar, and poured coffee into her favorite mug without asking. She didn't know how he remembered it from yesterday, but somehow he had. Halfway through breakfast, she said it. "I want to be honest with my mother." Lionel nodded slowly. "Okay. I want to tell her you stayed, that we're trying something, that we're not pretending anymore." "Yes." "Do you want to tell her everything?" he asked gently. Florence shook her head. "Not yet. I just want to stop lying about the part that feels real." After breakfast, Lionel offered to take apart the old screen door that had been moaning like a ghost every time it opened. Florence agreed, though she suspected he needed the distraction as much as she did. She spent the afternoon at the diner, but her thoughts wandered. Customers came and went. Carla gave her a knowing look from the back counter, and the second Florence flipped the sign to closed. She turned to her best friend. "Do you think I'm crazy?" "For what?" "Letting him stay. Letting this turn into something." Carla wiped down a table. "Florence, you let a stranger into your life when he had nothing but a cup of coffee and a quiet presence. That's not crazy. That's instinct. You don't do things on a whim. You do them when they feel right." Florence leaned against the counter, her voice softer now. "He's still a mystery." "So are you, half the time." "That's not comforting." Carla chuckled. "It should be. He makes you laugh, Flo. He makes you pause. When was the last time you did either of those things with someone who wasn't blood or me?" Florence didn't answer because she didn't have one. When she got home, Lionel was on the front porch, sitting beside a small paper bag. "What's that?" she asked, setting down her keys. "I picked up a few things in town," he said. "I thought maybe you'd want to add to the quilt." Her heart jumped. He pulled out a square of soft gray flannel. "It's from an old shirt. One I wore when things were falling apart. I kept it because it reminded me that even when the outside frays, the inside can still be strong. Florence didn't say anything. She just took the fabric, ran her fingers across it. "It's perfect," she whispered. "You said the quilt was made from pieces of your life," he said. "I thought maybe a piece of mine could belong there too." Florence blinked fast. "I haven't touched it in months. Maybe it's time." That night they sat together in the living room. Lionel hand-stitched while Florence guided his fingers. The thread pulled taut and clean, binding memories to fabric. "I've never made something like this before," he said. "Me either," she replied. "But it's not about perfection. It's about the story." He looked at her then, and there was something steady in his gaze, something like peace. When the quilt was folded and the thread snipped, Florence stood to put it away, but Lionel gently touched her arm. "Wait." She paused. "I don't want to keep asking you to trust someone who hasn't proven himself. You're here. You stayed. That's something. But I want to give you more," he said. "Not just coffee and screen doors and flannel scraps. I want to give you something you don't have to doubt." Florence's voice was barely a breath. "Like what?" Lionel pulled something from his pocket, a folded slip of paper. She opened it slowly. It was a check. Blank. Signed. Her eyes shot up. "What is this?" "It's not a test. It's not a trick. It's my way of showing you that I'm not who Josie says I am. I don't want to buy anything. I just want you to know, if I walk away, it won't be because I had to. It'll be because we chose it. Together." She stared at the check, then at him. "You think this makes me feel better?" "I think it shows you I have nothing to hide." She folded the paper slowly, deliberately, and handed it back. "Keep it," she said. "What I want from you doesn't fit in a box or on a line next to a dollar sign." He took it without argument, slid it back into his pocket. "I figured as much." Florence smiled, but it didn't reach all the way to her eyes. "I don't need you to be rich, Lionel." He looked at her, the weight of everything behind his voice. "I just need to be real." She nodded once. "Then let's start there." And for the first time since he'd walked into her life, Florence realized she wasn't just holding on to something broken. She was building something honest, thread by thread, day by day, and maybe, just maybe, it would be enough. The rain started just before dawn, tapping gently against the kitchen windows like a reminder that nothing stays still forever. Florence sat at the table, fingers curled around her coffee mug, eyes unfocused. The house was quiet, but not empty. Lionel was still sleeping in the guest room. She could hear the occasional creak of the old bed frame when he turned, the soft shift of the floorboards when he moved. She'd grown used to that rhythm, too used to it. Outside, the sky was gray and moody, a reflection of what churned inside her. The check, now sealed in an envelope and tucked into a drawer, had opened something she couldn't close again. It wasn't about the money. It was what it meant, what it whispered. That maybe Lionel hadn't just walked away from a fortune. Maybe he was still running, and maybe she'd let him run straight into her without asking why. By the time the diner opened, the sidewalks were slick, the air thick with that earthy, pre-storm weight. Florence tried to focus on the coffee orders, the familiar routine of eggs and toast, but her mind wandered. Every bell over the door made her stomach flip. Carla showed up just after 9, wearing rain boots and a look that said she already knew too much. "You look like you've been up since Tuesday," she said, flipping her umbrella closed. "I'm fine," Florence said. "That's a lie and a half." Florence didn't argue. She just kept wiping down the counter like it might give her answers. Carla pulled up a stool. "You gonna tell me what's eating you, or do I have to pry it out with sarcasm and stubbornness?" Florence exhaled. "I keep waiting for the truth to feel like enough, but with Lionel it always feels like there's more." Carla tilted her head. "More how?" "More behind the calm, more behind the silence. He gave me this check, not to use, just to prove something, and I still can't tell if it's a gift or a shield. Carla frowned. You think he's hiding again? I think he's still deciding if he wants to be known. The diner bell rang. Florence turned instinctively, but it wasn't Lionel. It was Nora. She walked in with her rain hat, cheeks flushed from the wind, and sat down like she had something to say. Mama, Florence said cautiously. I had lunch with Pastor Liam yesterday, Nora said without preamble. He mentioned Lionel. Florence's stomach sank. He said Lionel seemed like a man trying to do good, Nora continued, but that he also seemed guarded. Florence leaned against the counter. He is. And what do you think he's guarding? Pieces of himself, she said. Maybe the parts he doesn't want to hand over unless he knows they won't be broken again. Nora was quiet for a moment, folding her hands. That's not a bad instinct. But you have to ask yourself, are you in love with the parts he shows you, or the parts he hides? Florence blinked. I don't know yet. Then maybe it's time you find out. Later that afternoon, Lionel showed up at the back door of the diner, soaked through and smiling like the weather couldn't touch him. I tried to fix the loose board on your back steps, he said, but the rain had other plans. You didn't have to come out in this, she said, handing him a towel. I didn't want to sit still. She poured him coffee. They stood in the kitchen, the hum of the cooler behind them, the windows fogging slightly from the warmth inside. You ever think about leaving again? She asked. Lionel looked up, surprised. What do you mean? Just walking out one day, no explanations, like you did before. I think about it more than I'd like to admit. Her heart dropped. But not because of you, he added quickly, because I still don't know if I deserve to stay. Florence stared at him, every nerve in her body awake. Deserve doesn't mean anything to me, she said. Not if you won't give yourself the chance to prove you're more than what you lost. He stepped closer, hands still damp from the rain. You make me want to stay, every day, even when it scares the hell out of me. She swallowed hard, then stopped waiting for the moment to run. Just be here. Lionel's voice dropped to a whisper. I'm trying. The diner bell rang. Carla called from the front. Flo, you've got a visitor. Florence stepped out to find Sammy, one of the teen servers, standing there with a plastic bag and a nervous look. Hey, Sammy said. This came to the front door at home, addressed to you. Handwritten, no return. Florence took the envelope, the paper thick and expensive feeling. Thanks, sweetie. She opened it slowly as Sammy left, her fingers trembling without permission. Inside was a single sheet of stationery, typed, formal. Florence scanned the words, her knees nearly buckled. Dear Ms. Harper, this is to confirm the pending transfer of property listed under Mercer Development Holdings to Harper Dell Enterprises, LLC. You will receive full documentation within 5 business days. This was requested by Mr. Elias R. Mercer. She couldn't breathe. Lionel. She turned, storming back into the kitchen. He was still sipping coffee, calm as a lake. You bought the diner? She said, voice sharp with disbelief. He blinked. I wanted to give you something secure, in your name, without condition. You went behind my back. I wanted it to be a surprise. It's not a gift, Lionel, it's a statement, and you didn't ask if I wanted it. He set the mug down. I didn't mean to hurt you. You keep saying that, and then you do something huge and quiet and all wrapped in good intentions, but I'm still standing here feeling blindsided. Lionel stepped forward, but she held up a hand. I need space, she said, voice shaking. He nodded. I'll go. She turned away, heart cracking open in a way she hadn't expected. The truth was here. But it still wasn't the whole story. And until he gave her that, she wasn't sure she could keep stitching pieces together, hoping they'd someday make something whole. Florence hadn't touched the check. It sat in the drawer beneath the quilt pieces, right where she'd left it. But now, beside it, was something heavier. That letter. A deed, a transfer, a gift she never asked for and didn't know how to accept. 3 days had passed since Lionel left the kitchen without protest. He hadn't called, hadn't shown up at the diner, and somehow that silence was louder than anything he could have said. She told herself she needed the space. She'd asked for it. But now, in the quiet of her home, it just felt like something was missing. Not in a romantic, dramatic way, but in a real, breathing, this seat shouldn't be empty kind of way. The diner had been busier than usual, partly from the gossip, partly from sympathy. Carla stayed close, eyes sharp, waiting for Florence to break. "Still nothing?" she asked, as they closed up that night, wiping down the counters under the warm hum of the overhead lights. Florence shook her head. "I don't know if I want something." Carla leaned her hip against the register. "You don't have to want a man just because he did a big dramatic thing for you. It's not the deed. It's the way he did it. Quiet. Behind the curtain. Like he was writing a play and casting me in the lead without asking if I knew the lines." Carla folded the towel she was holding. "So what now?" "I keep moving. I run the diner. I finish the quilt. I wait for the ache to turn into something useful." "Has he left town?" "I don't know," Florence said, then added softer, "and I'm not sure if I want to." Carla didn't push. The next morning, Florence opened early, just her and the coffee. Rain had given way to fog, the kind that blurred edges and made the town feel smaller, quieter. She flipped the chairs off the tables one by one until she reached the back corner. A white envelope sat on the cushion. Her heart froze. She looked around. No sign of who left it. She reached for it slowly, cautious like it might dissolve. Her name was written across the front. Just Florence. She opened it with shaky fingers. Inside was a single page, handwritten. "Florence, I didn't stay away to punish you. I stayed away to listen, to give you space. You were right. I took what wasn't mine to give. I acted out of gratitude, not trust, and that wasn't fair to either of us. But I want to give you something else now, something smaller, but harder to offer. My story. If you want it, come find me. Lionel." She read it twice, then folded it gently and tucked it into her pocket like it might float away if she didn't hold on. She didn't go after him right away. Instead, she worked, poured coffee, took orders, smiled at regulars, and carried the note in her chest like a second heartbeat. When the lunch rush passed, she slipped into the back booth with her notebook and pen. The quilt was nearly done, 10 squares stitched, each one a memory, a scar, a soft place. She added Lionel's flannel today, sewed it into the corner like a quiet promise. Then she stood, took off her apron, and told Carla she was leaving early. "Where are you going?" Carla asked, eyes narrowing. "To find him." Carla didn't say anything for a moment. Then she nodded. "Good." Florence walked first to the library. He'd been there once, early on, tucked into a corner reading a book about local history. The librarian shook her head, hadn't seen him in a while. Next, she walked the stretch of downtown where he used to sit, on the bench outside the thrift store. It was empty, but beneath it, tucked behind the legs, was another folded square of paper. She opened it. Close. Warmer. She smiled despite herself. "Lionel Mercer," she whispered. "You strange, beautiful man." She kept walking. The hill behind the church had a view of the whole town. When she reached the top, he was sitting there, legs folded, coat pulled tight, his back to her. She didn't call out, just walked until the grass crunched under her shoes. He turned. Their eyes met. "I thought maybe you wouldn't come," he said, standing slowly. Florence stopped in front of him. "I almost didn't." He nodded once. "I understand." She pulled the note from her coat. "You said you wanted to give me your story." "I do." "Then tell me." He sat on the bench, motioned for her to sit. "I was the younger brother, always second to everything, grades, attention, the company. When I built Mercer Tech, I brought Miles in because I believed in family." Florence listened, the wind soft around them. "He didn't just sell his shares, he sold my name. To people who turned the company into something I didn't recognize. They gutted the values, fired people I'd promised stability to. And I watched it happen with my signature on the papers." "You left," she said. "I walked away before I became what they were turning me into." "And you came here?" He nodded. "I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere no one expected anything from me. And now?" "I expect something from myself again," Lionel said, "because you showed me what it feels like to build instead of run." Florence swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "Because I didn't want you to love the version of me with answers. I wanted you to see the one who was still learning." She stared at him, at the man who had once been a name on a door, a title in a headline, now just Lionel, real, still becoming. "I don't love you for what you did," she said, her voice trembling. "I love you for what you let me see when you didn't think I was looking." He blinked. "You love me?" She smiled. "I think I have for a while." He reached for her hand, held it like it might dissolve. "No more hiding?" he asked. "No more guessing," she replied. They sat there, hand in hand, as the fog slowly lifted from the hills, revealing the whole town below, exactly where it had always been. Only now it looked different, like something they could belong to, together. Florence had always believed that turning points came with warning signs, a crack in the foundation, a slammed door, a phone call at midnight. But this one came quietly. It came wrapped in sunlight, filtered through lace curtains, with the smell of biscuits baking and Lionel humming softly in the other room. She should have known. She should have felt it. It started with a letter. She found it in the mailbox, wedged between an electric bill and a church newsletter. The envelope was heavy, formal, her name printed in sharp black ink. No return address. She opened it at the kitchen table while Lionel washed the dishes, sleeves rolled to his elbows, his back turned. Her fingers trembled before she even read the first line. "Dear Ms. Harper, this is a legal notice confirming that your property, the Magnolia Diner, has been challenged under Section 47C of North Carolina Small Business Ownership Code. An anonymous complaint was filed regarding the legitimacy of the transfer and the identity of the previous owner, Elias R. Mercer." Her heart stopped. "Florence?" Lionel's voice behind her. "Everything okay?" She didn't answer. He walked around the table and looked at the letter in her hands. His face paled. "I can explain," he said softly. She looked up at him, her eyes already burning. "I think you need to." Lionel pulled out the chair across from her and sat, folding his hands like he was praying. "When I transferred the deed, I didn't anticipate anyone would notice. It was meant to be quiet, clean. But I forgot that when you leave the world I came from, it doesn't stop watching you." Florence held the letter tightly. "You said it was yours to give." It was. But there are still people, investors, who think they have a claim. Old partners. They watch everything I do, hoping I'll make a mistake they can use. Her voice cracked. "And now they've found me." "No," Lionel said quickly. "They found me. You just happened to be close enough to get caught in it." Florence stood, pacing the kitchen. "Why didn't you tell me this could happen?" "Because I didn't think it would. I thought I could give you something solid." something no one could take away. You gave me something with strings, Lionel. Strings you knew were still tangled. He stood, but kept his distance. I didn't want to drag you into the past I left behind. But you did, she said, breath catching. And you did it without asking. The silence in the room wrapped around them, thick and cold. I wanted to give you freedom, Lionel whispered. I never asked for that kind of freedom, she snapped. I just wanted honesty. He stepped closer, voice low. Then let me fix this. Let me fight it. I don't want to fight, she said. I want peace, and you... She stopped, throat tightening. You brought chaos into the one place I had peace. Lionel didn't move. So what do you want me to do? I don't know, she said, shaking her head. But I need space. Real space this time. No letters, no notes under booths. Just time. His shoulders fell like someone had turned gravity up. I understand. He walked to the door, paused with his hand on the knob. I never meant to hurt you. I know, she said, voice barely audible. But you did. He left without another word. The door clicked shut behind him. Florence sat back down at the table and looked at the letter again. It blurred through the tears she didn't even realize had fallen. Not because of the diner. Not even because of Lionel. But because she had let herself believe that something broken could finally stay whole. And now, she wasn't sure it ever had been. The quilt lay half-finished across the back of the couch, its edges curled like a question mark. Florence hadn't touched it since Lionel left. Every time she looked at it, her fingers itched to stitch, but her heart pulled back. It was as if finishing it meant closing the chapter he'd started with her. And she wasn't ready for that. Not yet. It had been a week. No calls, no letters, no Lionel. He'd vanished as quietly as he arrived, and the town, sensing the change, filled in the silence with whispers. Josie had already come by the diner twice under the guise of just checking in. Pastor Liam had offered a prayer that felt more like a question. Even Carla, for all her loyalty, had kept glancing at Florence like she was bracing for a dam to break. Have you heard anything? Carla asked one afternoon as they folded napkins together. Florence didn't look up. No. You want to? Florence paused, her hands stilling. I don't know. Some days, yes, other days. I'm not sure I'd believe him even if he did call. Carla set down her stack and leaned in. You still love him? Florence didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned toward the window, where the wind played with the edge of the diner's awning. The world looked so normal out there. But inside her, everything felt paused. I think love doesn't vanish just because trust gets shaken, she said softly. It just waits in a quieter place. Carla nodded. Then maybe it's time to get a little louder. That night, Florence sat at the kitchen table, the light above her casting long shadows across the tile. She pulled the quilt into her lap, ran her fingers over the square of Lionel's flannel. She thought about all the little things he'd said, the big things he hadn't, the ways he tried to protect her, and the ways he didn't. She took out her sewing kit. Each stitch was slow, deliberate. She added a square from her father's old fishing vest, one from her mother's apron, a scrap from an old church dress. And finally she reached for a piece she hadn't planned to use, a napkin from the diner, faintly stained, embroidered with the Magnolia logo. The place that held everything, her past, her name, her struggle, her pride. She stitched it into the center of the quilt, and when she finished, she didn't cry. She just held it close. The next morning, Sammy came by the diner early. Florence was setting chairs down when the door opened and the teenager stepped in, cheeks flushed from the morning air. Got something for you, Sammy said, pulling a folded note from her bag. Florence hesitated. From who? Guy showed up by the bridge last night, Sammy said. Said if I still worked here, I'd know what to do with it. Florence took the note, already bracing herself, but it wasn't from Lionel. It was from an attorney. Her heart sank. She read quickly. It wasn't about the lawsuit. It was a notification. Mercer Development Holdings had officially withdrawn the claim. The complaint was dismissed. The diner was hers. Clean. Final. At the bottom of the letter, in Lionel's handwriting, were 4 words. I gave it back. Florence folded the letter carefully, her breath catching. Later that evening, as twilight settled across the mountains, she stepped into the living room and spread the finished quilt across the couch. It was beautiful, imperfect, mismatched, full of fabric that didn't belong together until it did. Just like her life. Just like him. She didn't know where Lionel was, or if he was ever coming back, but for the first time she didn't feel broken by that. She felt steady, whole in a way that wasn't about having everything, but about knowing what she'd built mattered, whether anyone came back to witness it or not. And that kind of peace? It didn't need a ribbon around it. It just needed to be lived. It started with a sound Florence hadn't heard in weeks. The bell above the diner door. Not the usual jingle when the lunch crowd poured in, or when Sammy came back from break. This one was quieter, slower, like someone walking into a place they weren't sure they still belonged. Florence didn't look up right away. She was wiping down the back counter, her hands moving on autopilot, mind still tangled in the letter from Lionel's lawyer that now lived in the front pocket of her apron. She'd read it 3 times that morning alone, and each time it felt heavier. I wasn't sure if you'd still be here. She turned. Lionel stood just inside the doorway, hat in hand, damp from the mist outside. His shoulders carried less tension than she remembered, but his eyes, those same tired, thoughtful eyes, held the same question he'd had the day he first sat on the bench across the street. Florence stared at him for a long moment, then finally said, "It's my diner. Where else would I be?" He stepped closer. The room felt too quiet. Even the coffee machine seemed to pause. "I didn't come to explain," he said. "You deserve more than another apology." She folded the towel in her hands. "Then why'd you come?" "To say thank you, for holding what I gave you, even when it wasn't fair, and for letting go when I couldn't." Florence met his eyes. "You gave it back. I had to." "No, you didn't. You chose to." Lionel nodded. "I realized that owning something and loving something aren't the same. And I didn't want to confuse the two again." A pause stretched between them. It wasn't tense, it was tender, worn in. Florence walked slowly around the counter and stood just a few feet from him. "So, what are you here for now?" He swallowed hard. "For a second chance. Not at the deed, at you, at showing up, this time with nothing in my hands but what's real." Florence's breath caught. "I don't need saving," she said. "I know. And I don't want someone who disappears when things get messy." "I don't either," Lionel said softly. He stepped closer now, close enough for her to smell rain and the faintest hint of cedarwood, the kind of scent that lingers when someone's been standing still long enough to let the world press itself into them. "I thought I was protecting you by staying quiet," he continued, "but I was protecting myself, from being seen in full." "And now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I want to be seen," he said, "even if it means showing you the dents, the ugly parts, the regrets." She studied him, really studied him. "I've got my own dents," she said quietly. "Whole cabinets full." He smiled, not in triumph, but in relief. "Then maybe we build something from that." Florence turned toward the back booth, the one he used to sit at during those first few weeks. The one where she first saw him, Not as a stranger, but as something else entirely. She walked over and sat down. "Sit," she said. Lionel followed, easing into the seat across from her. For a while they didn't talk. They just watched each other, watched the rain roll down the window, watched the street carry on like nothing in the world had changed. "I finished the quilt," she said suddenly. He looked surprised. "You did?" She nodded. "It's not perfect, but it tells the story." "May I see it?" Florence hesitated, then stood. "Come with me." They left the diner, locking the door behind them, walked in silence through the soft drizzle, steps in rhythm. When they reached her house, she led him into the living room and unfolded the quilt across the couch. Lionel stepped forward, fingers brushing over each square: her father's vest, her mother's apron, a church dress, a diner napkin, his flannel. "It's beautiful," he whispered. "It's us." Florence sat down on the edge of the couch. "It's everything I couldn't say out loud." He lowered himself beside her. "Then maybe it's time we stop stitching from memory and start living the rest." She turned to him, eyes glassy but steady. "Do you think we can do that?" "I think if we're both willing to stay through the hard parts, we can." She rested her head against his shoulder, the quilt warm across their legs. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was waiting for the other shoe to drop. She felt home, and home didn't need perfect. It just needed present. The air inside the Magnolia Diner carried a kind of calm that didn't ask for attention. It just welcomed you in. It had been 2 weeks since Lionel returned, and somehow everything felt the same, and nothing did. The booths were still scratched, the coffee still strong, the regulars still asked for extra jam, but Florence no longer moved through the space like a woman guarding every breath. She'd started leaving the kitchen door open, just wide enough for Lionel to step through in the mornings with fresh biscuits or a joke about her too-strong coffee. They weren't sharing a home, not yet, but they were sharing time. And time, when it came wrapped in truth, changed everything. That morning, Florence was wiping down the menu boards when Nora walked in, wearing her good earrings and that stiff kind of smile that usually meant she had something loaded behind it. Florence straightened. "Morning, Mama." Nora nodded toward the corner booth, his booth. "He back for good?" "He's here," Florence said simply. "And he's staying?" Florence set the rag down. "Yes." Nora looked around the diner, her eyes softer than expected. "I see the quilt's up." Florence followed her gaze to the back wall, where the finished piece now hung in a shadow box frame just above the coat rack, the flannel square, the diner napkin, threads pulled tight around the pieces that mattered. "You never told me what it meant," Nora said. Florence paused. "It means I stopped waiting to feel worthy of peace and started making it." Nora didn't speak for a moment. Then, quietly, "And him? Does he bring you peace?" Florence didn't hesitate. "He brings honesty, the kind that's earned, not promised. That's more than enough." Nora nodded once. "Then I suppose I'll bring him a slice of pie and start treating him like family." Florence smiled. He'd like that. Later that afternoon, Lionel walked in through the back with a stack of receipts and a bag of cinnamon rolls from the corner bakery. He set them down with a dramatic sigh. "Running a place like this? I don't know how you've done it all these years." Florence arched a brow. "You owned a tech company. And not once did I have to fight a jam delivery man over an invoice." She laughed. It still surprised her how easily that sound came around him. They sat in the back booth together, sorting receipts and splitting one of the cinnamon rolls like it was Sunday morning. "You know," Lionel said after a pause, "I've been thinking about your idea." "What idea?" "The community brunch. Local artists, musicians, a donation box for the food bank. You said it once in passing, but I haven't stopped picturing it." Florence blinked. You actually like that idea? I loved it, he said, because it's exactly what this place already is. You just want to stretch the walls a little wider. She felt her throat tighten. I've spent most of my life holding everything together. I never really made room for building something bigger. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Then maybe we build it together, brick by brick, brunch by brunch. Florence looked down at their hands, the way his thumb traced the edge of hers like a quiet promise. She didn't need a proposal. She didn't need fireworks. But in that small, sugar-dusted moment, she knew she was choosing something real. Again. On purpose. That evening, after the diner closed, she brought out the photo box from under the counter. Lionel sat beside her as she spread old Polaroids and faded letters across the table. Photos of her as a teenager with flour on her cheek, her father leaning over the grill, her mother in an apron with a defiant glare. Lionel picked up one of her father. He looks like the kind of man who built things slowly. He was, Florence said. Everything he did was with his hands. Steady, precise. He once fixed a whole screen door hinge using nothing but a butter knife and duct tape. Lionel chuckled. Remind me to stop fixing things, I won't live up. She looked at him, her expression soft. You already are. When she got home that night, she stood in the doorway for a long time before turning on the light. The living room felt fuller now. Not with things, but with memory, with meaning. The quilt still hung where it had the day he first returned, but now Florence saw something else in it. Not just a timeline of what she'd survived, but evidence of what she'd chosen. Her phone buzzed. A text. Lionel. You never told me your favorite flower. She smiled, thumb hovering over the keys. Florence. Daisies. The kind that grow sideways and don't care if they're pretty. 3 dots. Then, Lionel, I'll bring you a bouquet. No vase, just string, like they're meant to be held, not displayed. She pressed the phone to her chest. There was no big moment, no loud declaration. Just this, a booth, a quilt, a promise wrapped in a daisy stem. And for the first time, Florence didn't just believe in the life she was building, she was living it. The diner was closed, but the lights were still on. Florence stood in front of the mirror in the back room, adjusting the collar of her soft cream dress. Not white, not flashy, just hers, the same way everything in her life finally felt, uncomplicated, honest, and chosen. She took one last look at herself, then turned and walked through the swinging kitchen door. The booths were filled, not with customers, but with friends. Sammy had tied daisies to the backs of chairs. Carla wore red lipstick and had already cried, twice. Nora sat at the end of the counter in her pearls, sipping lemonade with the kind of pride she rarely let slip onto her face. And Lionel. Lionel stood by booth 4, the very place this story started. In a gray-blue shirt, sleeves rolled, nerves tucked into his smile. He held a small bunch of daisies tied with twine. You're early, Florence teased as she stepped toward him. I've been early for a long time, he said. I just didn't know what I was waiting for. She laughed under her breath and reached for his hand. Pastor Liam cleared his throat from behind the register, where they'd set up a makeshift altar with a cross made of cinnamon sticks and twinkle lights. Friends, he began, we've gathered here in the most sacred of Southern institutions, an old diner with good coffee and better stories, to witness a commitment. Not of perfection, but of promise. Not of fantasy, but of faith. Florence squeezed Lionel's hand. They didn't need rings. They'd exchanged enough over the months, scraps of trust, glances that softened over time, words sewn into fabric, forgiveness passed back and forth like warm bread. Still, Lionel pulled something from his pocket. It was a napkin, folded carefully, the Magnolia logo still faint in one corner. He unfolded it slowly and showed her what was inside. a small patch of the same flannel he'd given her for the quilt. "A reminder," he whispered, "that love doesn't come with clean corners. It comes with edges, and wear, and warmth." Florence took it gently, nodding, her eyes stinging. "Do you, Florence Harper," Liam asked, "take this man, not as a savior, not as a fixer, but as a partner, to continue writing the story you started on your own?" "I do," she said, her voice steady. "And do you, Lionel Mercer, take this woman, not as a refuge, not as a reward, but as a truth you choose every day?" "I do," Lionel said, "every version of her." "Then I pronounce you something better than new," Liam said. "I pronounce you real, built, not found, and loved, not borrowed." Applause rose around them, gentle, warm, imperfect, the kind that fills you more than it stuns you. Later, after cake and slow music and stories from regulars that turned into laughter and misty eyes, Florence sat on the edge of the counter, watching it all unfold. Nora joined her, holding a paper plate with 2 bites of lemon pie left. "You know," she said, "I used to think love was about stability, about choosing someone who wouldn't shake the table too much." Florence smiled. "And now?" "I think it's about someone who helps you build a better table." Lionel walked up beside them, brushing crumbs from his shirt. "What are we building next?" he asked. Florence slid off the counter, her fingers brushing his. "A garden, maybe, or a porch swing, or just more mornings where no one needs to say much." He leaned in, voice low. "How about starting with a honeymoon brunch?" She laughed. "You just want an excuse to cook bacon." He raised a brow. "Don't act like my cornbread didn't change your life." She nudged him with her shoulder. It did. Outside, the evening settled over Asheville like a soft blanket. The sky turned lavender. Street lamps blinked awake, and inside the diner, light still poured from the windows, onto pavement, onto the sidewalk, onto the bench across the street where Lionel once sat like a ghost. Now, it was just a bench again. Florence stood in the doorway, Lionel's arm around her waist, the quilt visible behind them on the wall. "Funny," she said. "You came in with nothing. I invited you to a birthday party because I didn't want to show up alone." "And now?" he asked. She looked at him, eyes glassy. "Now I couldn't imagine showing up to anything without you." Lionel smiled and kissed the side of her head. "Turns out," he murmured, "sometimes the richest love starts with nothing but truth." And as they stood in the doorway of a place built on second chances and quiet beginnings, Florence understood that love wasn't found in grand gestures or perfect timing. It was found in the everyday, in the booths we return to, in the voices that stay when others go quiet, and in the hands we reach for. Not because we're afraid to fall, but because we finally want to rise. If you enjoyed this video, comment 1 to let me know. If not, comment 2. Your thoughts matter to me either way.